consumed by COVID-19 as everyone else is on this call, I think it's going to be nice to be thinking about something that's post-COVID. And the exercise that you're going to undertake here is really going to take us into that future place. And I look forward to seeing the fruitions of that effort. And I know there will be. I think back, when I was a planning commissioner serving on the task force in previous ones, and not being a voting member, but certainly being actively involved, just having the opportunity to, voice where you see the need to add features or add elements, or to highlight something that should be a part of the future development, and then to see it happen later is pretty amazing. So we've got a lot of examples across this district, and your effort and your work is going to produce some others. So I'll just say again, thank you for your contributions here. And as always, just to let you know, my door is open. If you have questions or issues you want to bring to me, related to this or unrelated to this, feel free to reach out. You can reach me on the web, or you can reach me through my staff. I think all of you are familiar with Matt Reniger. Matt is my chief of staff. He's easily able to get to me at any time. So certainly feel free if there are any issues. And I'll say at this point, thank you again. And if there's any questions or thoughts that you have now that you want me to be aware of, certainly feel free. And otherwise, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. So to get started here, there is a script I have to go through, because unlike the Land Use Committee, the task force is actually a legal body that operates under some very strict rules. So I'm going to bear with me, please, while I go through a few pages of script. So to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate the emergency procedures authorized by the Freedom of Information Act and the Emergency Ordinance, the Lee District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. As I just said, it's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience as we go through this. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and also the location from where you're participating. And you can just say at home if indeed you're at home. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So I'm about to start the roll call here. Robert Livingstone. Okay. Can you hear us? Robert Livingstone.
Robert, you're unmuted now. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
I could barely, Robert, I heard that you responded, but you were breaking up. I couldn't really tell what you said.
I said Robert Livingstone at home.
At home, okay, thank you. Carol Alem.
Yes, I'm at home.
Very good, thank you. Rand Pixner. Rand Pixa.
This is Graham. Rand was on the call. He must have dropped off, so maybe we can come back to him.
Okay. And then he has an alternate member from his community. I'm not sure he's with us, Andy Bernick. I hadn't seen that name online tonight. Pamela Pineros.
Yes, I'm here. I'm at home.
Very good, thank you. Leah Lambus Skidmore.
I'm here and I'm at home.
Thank you. Larry Dempsey.
I'm here and at home.
Thank you. Jane Kelly. Jane Kelly. Haven't seen her name pop up.
Also muted. Her name is there, but it's muted.
Yeah, I'm here at home.
Oh, you are here. Good. Thank you,
Thank
Jane.
you.
John Schaefer. Are you with us, John Schaefer? Have we seen John's name popping up?
This is Graham. I haven't seen him. He was having some audio connections problems, so I'm going to keep trying to get him on here while you do the call.
Okay. We'll come back. Jeff Seffel.
Yes, Jeffrey's here. Sona's here too. We're at home.
Very good. Thank you both. Tom Rickard. Tom Rickard. Have we seen Tom's name tonight?
I have not seen Tom.
And I'm not seeing
Okay.
those things. I can check.
Moving on, Melinda Hanson. I believe she decided she did not want to participate in these meetings. Jim Drinkard.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here at home in Loisdale Estates.
Thank you. Rosemary Clee.
Here, and I'm home.
Very good, thank you. And Rosemary, you're is Liz Murphy. I think I saw Liz's name. Liz,
I'm here and at home.
Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Holly Doherty.
Hello, I'm here. I'm at home in Rosedale.
Very good, thank you. Don Tennant. Is Don with us? Have we seen Don's name?
I've not seen Don.
Okay. Carl Sell.
This is Carl. I'm here at Rose Hill.
All right, thank you. Mariah Jones.
Mariah Jones, I'm here. I'm at home.
Thank you. Bruce Wagner. Bruce Wagner, are you with us? Have we seen Bruce's name tonight?
No, we have not.
Okay. Steve Levinson.
I'm here in beautiful downtown Springville.
Beautiful downtown Springfield. All right.
Hey, by the way, I do these meetings sort of worldwide, and when we run into people who are breaking up, like that first fellow Livingston was, if he'll drop his video, sometimes that helps.
Thank you. Tom Sachs.
I'm here.
And you're at home, I assume? Tom, could you?
Yeah, I'm here and at home.
Very good. And by the way, I skipped over my own name. I'm here and I'm at home. Jim McCracken. Jim, are you with us? Have we seen Jim's name, Jim McCracken?
I haven't seen Jim.
Okay. He has two alternates, Juliana Sharp. Juliana, are you with us? Or Rachel Dexter? Is Rachel with us?
I haven't seen either of them.
Okay. John Tomko. And have we had any improvements with John Tomko?
So I just unmuted John to see if we can hear from him, but I'm not hearing his audio.
Richard Dresner. Richard, I know you're there. Can you hear us? Richard Dresner?
Can you hear me?
Is this Richard? I heard somebody say, "Can you hear me?" Was that
Yes.
Richard Dresner?
Yes, that was me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're where? Richard, where are you? I can't hear you say where you're at. I know you're saying you're at home, but I can't hear it.
Home.
You're at home.
Okay.
You can see me but not hear me?
Well,
Now we can hear
hear
you.
you now.
Okay.
I'm here. This is John again, and I'm at home.
Okay, so Graham, we still have, what are we going to do about the problem with John Tomko not being able to respond? And we also actually didn't get a response from Rand Pixa.
So I think what we can do, I counted a tally of 17 people, which constitutes a quorum. Ed, you might want to just double check that with your own tally. But if we wanted to, we can just try to ensure that they can get into the meeting, and if they're able to and are able to participate, then we'll announce them in. We could probably get John to call the phone number so that he can be hooked in and told to mute or unmute at the right time. But we can get them into the meeting at least. But for the purposes of constituting a quorum, we have a sufficient number.
Okay, yeah, I agree with your count. We have a total of 19, but 2 are alternate members. So we have a total of 17 full members. Okay, well, moving on. So at this point, I'm going to pass the virtual gavel, as if we ever had a real gavel, to our vice chair. And I've appointed Tom Sachs to be our vice chair. And I'm doing that so that I can be heard to make a series of motions. So Tom, you have the non-existent gavel.
Okay. And do we have any motions from the floor?
Well, I have a number of motions here. The first motion is, I move that each voice, aside from the ones we've just discussed, may be adequately heard by each other member of the Lee District SSPA task force. So we need to actually vote on the fact that we can each hear each other.
Is there a second?
Is there a second? Indeed, yes.
This is John again, and I'll second.
Can we proceed by just a simple yay or nay, like a voice vote rather than a roll call?
That's fine.
Yay.
Tom?
Yay. I'm going to call the vote. We'll do it by yays and nays. All in favor, yay.
Yay.
Aye.
Yay.
Yay.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion is carried. Are there any other motions from the floor?
Yes. Well, second, we have having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to the meeting. So this brings me to the second motion. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, the Freedom of Information Act's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the track a nomination page of the SSPA website, which is located at www.fairfax.gov/plan-amendments/SSPA/south/track-nomination. Hope you all have that memorized. Or by calling 1-408-418-9388. And then as TTY X 711. And entering the access code 129-318-0494. It is so moved.
Second nomination.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I heard the second. Let's do it. Yays, nays, all in favor?
Yay.
Yay.
Aye.
Aye.
Any not in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried.
Very good. Thank you. Next, it is required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the lead district SSPA task force's legal purposes, duties, and responsibilities. I therefore move that this meeting must be conducted online during the current emergency in order to discharge the lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities of the SSPA task.
I
Do I
second.
hear a second? Heard the second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried.
Thank you. Now, the procedures we're going to use tonight, well, the procedures we will use to conduct the task force meeting are laid out in a document that was sent to all task force members called Roles, Responsibilities, and Meeting Procedures. I will quickly summarize them here and then call for a vote to approve these as our rules. The job of the task force is to recommend to the Planning Commission whether or not each nomination should receive further detailed study by being included in something called the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program. The vote of the task force, whether or not to recommend inclusion for each nomination, will be documented on a task force report form submitted by our, I've asked Skidmore to serve as our secretary, and I thank her for agreeing to do this. Tonight, for each nomination, we're going to proceed as follows. We're going to take 5 minutes for staff to present the nomination, and that they'll go over the current plan language, the proposed change to that plan language, and any critical issues that are presented. Following that, the nominator will present arguments in favor of the nomination, and the nominator will have 7 minutes to present those arguments. After that, we're going to open this up to public comment. So we'll have about 20 minutes for questions and comments from the public, and we're going to limit that to at most 2 minutes per speaker. And after that we'll have about 18 to 20 minutes for the task force itself to discuss any issues and ask any questions. And then normally what we would do is we would follow that discussion by a vote. So tonight, because these two nominations that we're considering tonight are so closely related, we're going to hold off any vote on the first case until the end of the night, and we'll vote on both nominations together. These time limits may be adjusted as necessary to fairly and efficiently conduct the meeting. Time limits may be slightly different for future meetings to adjust for the time available per nomination. At the conclusion of the task force discussion for each nomination, I will call for a motion. Any member can move that the nomination be included in the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program, meaning it would receive further detailed study, or that it be excluded from that work program, meaning that it would not receive further study, or that it be included in the work program, but with specific recommendations from the task force. After the motion is seconded, we will vote by roll call vote. And as I said before, because tonight's two nominations are so closely related, we will do both votes at the end of the second case. If deemed appropriate, the task force may decide to defer any decision regarding a nomination until the final task force meeting on September 14th. So the last motion I have to make here is I hereby move that the document entitled Roles, Responsibilities, and Procedures be adopted as our rules.
If that's your motion, this is John again, and I'll second.
And let's have all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? The motion is passed.
Very good. Thank you, Tom, for wielding the imaginary gavel well. And now I guess I'm taking it back. Thank you. All right. So I do want to note before we proceed to considering the first nomination that we have received a written comment from 10 community members, and that these written comments have been distributed to members of the task force. And with that, let's move on to consideration of the first nomination. It's the docket numbers PC 19-LE-006 And that's at 5606 Oakwood Road. I believe David Gill is, well, I guess first we go to staff. I'm sorry.
Good
Thank
evening. Oh, excuse me, Graham. You want to say something, Graham?
There was just one additional thing that I think Steve, if you don't mind, Ed and Mike, there was just one additional thing that Steve was going to provide in terms of just the civics of WebEx and how it functions. If you wanted to.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Graham. For any attendees who are not familiar with WebEx, it's similar to many of the other video conferencing services that you may have used recently in other meetings. And if you hover your mouse or your cursor over the center of the screen, you should see the icons pop up at the bottom of the video. The circle to the far left is the mute button, and it turns red when you're muted, and then it turns black when you're unmuted. And the circle next to that is for toggling on and off your video. So I'll turn my video on now using that button. Again, it's the second from the left. And the button next to that, which looks like a silhouette of a person with 3 bars at the bottom, opens up the participants menu. And this is especially important because once you click on it, it should open a window to the right side. It has a list of all the participants that are in the meeting. And then if you go below that, there's also a list of other attendees who are also at the meeting. And then when you look at the bottom right hand of the window, you should see a small button that looks like a hand on it. And this will activate the hand raise function. And for our task force members, we're asking that you use the hand raise function if you have a question or comment. And please wait to be recognized and then unmute yourself to ask that question or make your comment. And then remute yourself and press the icon again to lower your hand. For members of the public that are attending, the raise hand function will also allow you to participate during the question and answer session for the public at the end of the meeting. Actually, it'll be after the presentations, I'm sorry. And you can use this button to raise your hand. And once you're recognized to speak, you'll hear a series of beeps, which will mean that you've been unmuted and ask your questions or make your comment. And again, please remember to lower your hand by clicking that hand raise icon again after you've been called on. And if you're calling in by phone, you can dial *3 on your dial pad, and that will also alert us that you have a question and would like to speak. For members of the task force, we are asking that you keep your microphones muted unless you are the active speaker in order to minimize background noise, feedback, and also echoes. And I'd also like to note that there's another circle that looks like a speech bubble next to the participant button, and that's the chat function. So if you find that you're having any technical difficulties, you can use that button to send myself, Stephen Waller, or Graham Owen a message that you're having difficulties hearing, or that you've been unmuted and you're trying to speak and we can't hear you, and we'll try to help you troubleshoot any technical issues you're having. The chat function will only be used to monitor and troubleshoot these technical questions and issues. So please be sure to ask any other questions regarding the nominations that we'll be looking at by using the hand raise feature. And that's it for the protocol. And if there are any questions or technical issues that don't relate to the nominations during the meeting, you feel free to send a chat message to myself or Graham. Thank you.
Before we get started here, we didn't hear from Rand Pixa when I called to see if everybody could hear everyone.
Yes, I was disconnected temporarily. I'm back. Thank you, Ed.
Good. All right. And then have we made any progress with John Tomko?
Not heard from John Tomko. I did hear from Don Tennant, though, so I believe he's on the call now.
Don is with us?
Yes, yes, I'm on the line.
Very good. And last one was John Schaefer. Did we have John? Apparently not. Okay. All right. Let's move along then. Let's start our consideration of the first case. 5606 Oakwood Road.
Sure. Hi, this is Mike Linsky. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I think, okay, great. I'm from Department of Planning and Development. I also noticed that there's a chat question. Jim Drinkard was having trouble finding the hand raise button. So if you look on the participants list, if you could get the participants list up on the right-hand side, it should be down at the bottom right of that. There's a little hand symbol. So hopefully that would help. And otherwise, I'll move on to, let me share my screen here. Hopefully. Okay, Graham or someone probably needs to give me permission to share. Oh, here we go. Maybe it was just slow. Okay. You all see the picture?
We can see you.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yes.
So this is the presentation for the first nomination of the night, which is PC 19-LE-006. And so both of these presentations were posted online mid last week, and these are the same presentations that are online. So hopefully if you at least got a chance to look these over. And if you didn't, they're available on there after the meeting. And so both of these nominations are at the Van Dorn Transit Station area on Oakwood Road. So that's why we're hearing them together tonight. So the first one, 006, is that concerns property located, well, they're both within the Van Dorn Transit Station area along Oakwood Road, south of Interstate 495 and east of Van Dorn Street in the northern part of the Lee Supervisory District. The other nomination is PC 19-LE-009. That's directly east of this property. This property is approximately 12 acres. It's undeveloped and wooded. It fronts onto Oakwood Road in the area of other undeveloped parcels, and there's scattered industrial and commercial uses along Oakwood Road as well that comprise Land Unit D of the Van Dorn Transit Station area. There's also an unnamed tributary of Backlick Run traversing the property. And the separate site-specific nomination to the east of this one comprises the remainder of Land Unit E. Interstate 495 forms an effective barrier between the northern portion of the TSA and the Metro Rail Station and the southern portion of the TSA where the subject property is located. There's currently no direct access to the station from Oakwood Road. But to access the station from the subject property, you have to travel Van Dorn Street to Eisenhower Avenue, and it's approximately 1 mile by car or 0.6 miles by foot. To the south and east of Land Unit D are stable, low-density residential neighborhoods located both within and outside of the transit station area. The current comprehensive plan recommends office use up to an intensity of 0.5 floor area ratio, or FAR. That's at the baseline level, with an ultimate development option applying to all of Land Unit D for mixed-use transit-oriented development up to 1.0 FAR. The mixed-use development should consist primarily of office, hotel, and retail uses, with potential for residential use as a mixed-use component, but only if phased to ensure a mix of both residential and non-residential uses at each stage of development. And due to limited road capacity and connectivity to the transit station, the plan limits development in Land Unit D to the baseline level until adequate roadway and transit access are provided. The ultimate vision for the TSA includes a bridge connecting Oakwood Road to Vine Street in order to maximize the development potential of the larger TSA. Subject nomination proposes a similar option for mixed-use development up to 850,000 square feet, which would be 1.5 FAR based on the current size of the parcel and 1.0 FAR based on the size of the parcel before previous right-of-way dedication. The justification for the nomination states that development would likely be less than 850,000 square feet. The proposal would support 50 to 75% of the total development potential as residential use, consisting of townhomes and low-density multifamily housing, as well as office, industrial, self-storage uses. Finally, the nomination proposes the elimination of plan condition requiring residential development to be phased concurrently with non-residential development. So staff's primary consideration when reviewing this nomination is its effect on the ability of the remainder of the land unit and the TSA area to realize the adopted plan, which is for pedestrian-oriented, higher density mixed use. Considering the plans for most of the remainder of the TSA, including Vine Street area north of I-495 and portions of land unit E to the east, rely on common transportation connections and coordinated planning. Furthermore, the proposed elimination of the residential phasing condition would effectively result in all residential development of the site if the other uses are not developed, further conflicting with the adopted plans. Finally, endorsing the inclusion of self-storage as a secondary use on the site may perpetuate an industrial along Oakwood Road, contrary to long-term plan goals for the area. Developing lower density residential uses and self-storage uses as proposed may work against the area-wide goals, if not considered within the context of a larger area. For those reasons, staff finds the nomination problematic when looked at in isolation. However, the remainder of Land Unit D has also been nominated for review as PC 19-LE-009, which proposes a similar residential mixed-use plan recommendation. The staff recognizes that considering the entirety of Land Unit D may enable a more comprehensive review of the adopted plan for the whole area south of I-495 to determine if the current plan remains viable or if changes to portions of the TSA plan may be warranted. Therefore, PC 19-LE-006 is recommended to be added to the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program to be reviewed concurrently with PC 19-LE-009 as part of a larger study of Land Unit D and the northern portion of Land Unit E of the Van Dorn TSA. That's all.
Thank you. So I guess we move on to David Gill to present for the nominator.
Thank you, Ed, and appreciate the brief introduction. And I'd like to say, you know, long-time listener, first-time caller on these type of calls. So, you know, glad everybody is able to make it and able to participate and in this grand experiment of civic participation. I echo Supervisor Luft's initial comment too about thinking about property in a post-COVID way, because I think how we live and how we work are going to change fundamentally. And this is a real chance to look at a site that frankly has had scale plan recommendation for more than 3 decades and has had recommendations that haven't been implemented for almost as long under their existing zoning. Because of those two facts, we really think this is the time to set up what the right long-range vision for the property should be. You're going to hear from my colleague Lynn Strobel later on about the adjacent site, and we're certainly welcoming her participation for her client as part of that property for both of us to be looked at together. And I'll go ahead and jump to my presentation here, which keeps that 7-minute time frame. Let's see.
So David, I just gave presenter permissions to you. So if you just share content, it's the 3rd button from the left.
Yep. And let's see there. And from the beginning. Again, this is Oakwood Van Dorn, and Oakwood Van Dorn is a group related to the Clark Construction, well, not the Clark Construction Group, but the Clark family, and they frankly own this property since the 1980s. I'll go ahead through here. Staff already identified the site context, and I apologize for the blurriness on this one, but I do think it gives some good sense for context. You know, the metro's close, but it is a little bit circuitous to get there. Staff mentioned the 3,000-foot walk to get there from a metro station. You can actually do that via a tunnel right here, a pedestrian one, and up Van Dorn to Eisenhower to Eisenhower to the metro. We've owned this site since 1980 and frankly have never been able to get it to work. We actually had the site rezoned in 1994, and as part of that rezoning, the site has an approval right now for 850,000 square feet of office mixed use. It's approved for 5 separate office buildings up to 8 stories. And as part of this, Oakwood Van Dorn Associates actually dedicated 5 acres to the county for use and expansion of the Oakwood, Van Dorn, and 495 interchanges. And in fact, a portion of that is being used right now for the affordable senior housing project. So it went from our property being dedicated for right-of-way to actually being used now for a separate use. And those 5 acres were largely this piece. The site was originally 17 acres and is now 12. So all this property in here was what was dedicated. This is the approved rezoning. Again, it's 1994, so I apologize for the fuzziness of it. It's a little hard to read, but here's Oakwood Drive as it comes over, if you're following my cursor. You've got buildings A, B, C, and D. These are 5 separate office buildings with structured parking, all up to 8 stories. Again, 850,000 square feet have been approved on here for the last now 26 years. But one thing that I think we all know intuitively is office hasn't worked here. We have made 4 major attempts to land key GSA tenants. And for a variety of reasons that we can get into, they've unfortunately skipped over this site. Our most recent effort was in 2018, where we did a full court press, and they went to a greenfield site out in Loudoun. One of the things they continue to cite is a lack of an amenity base in this area. Other elements are the fact that no contractor tail really emerged from the BRAC relocations or as part of those amenity bases that you see, frankly, closer to some of the other metro stations, whether it's in Alexandria, Arlington, and now with the Silver Line in Reston. One of the obvious examples of this as well is the Victory Center, and that building there has remained vacant. They were chasing a similar demographic, similar government GSA leases, and that's remained vacant. And in fact, some of the remainder out parcels there are going back and being rezoned as residential because the office market has never emerged. We mentioned COVID at the beginning. We'd be remiss not to mention it now. How we work in the future is going to change. And that's, I think, only going to exacerbate further the demand on suburban office locations. And frankly, there's going to be better opportunities elsewhere in the county with the Silver Line.
David, this is Graham. I'm sorry. Before we go any further, we're seeing some gray boxes that are just kind of hovering over your presentation. It's showing most of it, but there's just a couple of things. Would you mind trying to refresh?
Yeah. So how do I do that?
Maybe just X out of it, and then try to X out of the PDF that you have, and then pull it back up.
It's a PowerPoint, so it's
okay.
Yeah, it's still showing the gray boxes a little bit on my sharing screen at the top. I'm not quite sure why that is. It's not showing up on my version. Honestly, most of what I'm saying is what's on these slides. So hopefully the visual isn't as important, and you've got a good reminder from staff some of the orientation things here. There's nothing critical that I'm going to be showing that I'm not going to also be touching when I'm talking about it. The existing plan, sorry, this was the office does not work. I think the gray boxes are actually corresponding to those are the cameras. So those are the participant cameras, my camera in the corner, and then I think that should make that shrink a little bit. Apologize for the technical snafu, used to the Zoom and not the WebEx. One thing I did mention is the existing plan really is stale. Nothing about it has been implemented. It's been in existence for going on 3 decades now. Nothing along Oakwood Van Dorn has developed. And in fact, Supervisor McKay had to initiate a plan amendment even to make the affordable senior housing project work because the existing plan couldn't be used for implementing anything. The site is already recommended for a 1.0 FAR of hotel and residential is already recommended. What we're really talking about is the restriction that the residential phase must occur after the office phase. Again, nothing's been implemented in phase 2. And to be frank, I think this language is stale relative to how we view these policies for mixed use transit areas elsewhere in the county. We've looked at it again in Springfield, in Reston, in Tysons, at the Dulles Suburban Center, in Merrifield, and consistently been willing to look at a residential mixed use community without some of these artificial timing restrictions tied into them. And we just asked the opportunity to roll up our sleeves with you guys to think better about how this really important site might be able to work in the future. Oh, come on.
Okay, so.
Sorry, one last one. Just real quick, Ed. Again, no proposed changes to the FAR. All we're asking is we consider removal of the phasing consideration that's in the plan. Ideally, examine whether or not the mix of residential and office is exactly right. I think we still want to hold out for some commercial because we don't know the future, but I think it's certainly going to be less than it is under the current plan. And then just consideration of other non-residential uses that might achieve some of the same things as office. I mentioned high quality storage because we've seen consistently as people do move to transit-oriented locations, they want to have a place to put their lawnmowers and their holiday decorations. And with a appropriate professionalism, it can look very similar to an office building at the end of the day. Other uses such as medical care facility or senior housing, you know, we haven't really thought about, but those are other options that I think might make some sense. And then I just mentioned that this plan has been on the books for so long that all of the transportation improvement in this area should have been taking into account the fact that this could have been office at 150,000 square feet. So if we do move forward with a mixed use vision, it's almost certainly going to be less traffic and less traffic impact compared to those existing plan recommendations. With that, I mentioned all of our summaries. We just really want the chance to work on this. It's been a long time. It needs to be looked at, and we're really excited about this opportunity. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Ed, and happy to answer any questions if you guys have them, or if you want to hold off until after Lynn makes her presentation. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, David. So I guess now it's time for comments and questions from the public, from attendees who are not necessarily members of the committee or of the task force. Graham, I'll have to depend on you to figure out who wants to speak and to bring them up.
Sure. So if you are an attendee, you have the ability to raise your hand in the platform. So you'll just want to pull up the participant box. And just like Alexis has done, you can raise your hand and that'll let people know that you'd like to speak. Right. So, and if you're calling in by phone, if you're not in the video conference, you are calling in by phone, the way that you can raise your hand is by dialing *3. And that'll do the same thing so that we know to unmute you.
And I would just ask whoever, ask people who are speaking to keep it as short as possible. So are we ready for the first one, Graham?
We are. Alexis Glenn, you are unmuted on our side, so just make sure that you're unmuted on yours and you can speak.
All right, can you hear me on?
We can.
Great. I just had a quick question about the pedestrian bridge that was mentioned in some of the, it was mentioned, I think, in the staff recommendation documents that I saw. It sounded like the nomination kind of hinged on having this bridge available, accessible for potential future residents to access the metro station. So I'm wondering if there's any comment or any insights you all can give on how this factors in to this nomination.
Okay, this is Mike Kalinsky from Planning and Development. I can handle that if you would like. So I think that bridge is envisioned partially for the development of these areas to the south, but also for the Vine Street area, which will be the core area of the TSA right by the transit station. It only has one access to Vine Street up there too. So I think so the ultimate floor area that's envisioned by the plan for Vine Street relies on a connection like that from Oak Street down to the south, just to give another access to that area. For this area, the land unit D, the plan does expect some transportation solutions. It doesn't necessarily say the bridge specifically there, it just says something about, being adequate access being available, and it mentions pedestrian access as well as vehicular. So I think it's a little more flexible. But it does depend on some additional probably transportation capacity being available in order to, get past the baseline. So that would be up to the transportation folks to analyze and under the current conditions and seeing what all it would take. I hope that helped a little bit.
Sure.
And this is David Gill. I mean, from the nominator's perspective, we didn't anticipate it hinging on the bridge. In fact, we didn't think about the bridge. It's much more important for us to try and get what the right use mix is for this site, which is transportation is absolutely part of it. And frankly, that's something we can talk about in the frankly 2-year process that's coming up if this nomination moves forward.
Thank you.
We get the next participant, please.
Yeah, the next participant is Anne, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Blah. And we can.
Yeah, that's
Can you hear us?
It's Bloss.
Bloss, excuse me.
Yeah. I have 2 questions. One is, I can't remember which nomination, whether it was 006 or 009 where I read this, but there was a comment about the 65-foot buffer. Am I talking about the right nomination?
You are.
What would that be? Is that like landscaping or is that parking lot? What is that?
Sure. And unfortunately, if you weren't able to see on my somewhat sketchy proposal I showed from the existing zoning, I didn't call this out directly in my presentation, but our assumption is the 65-foot buffer established by that zoning would be the minimum of any discussion to incorporate in any potential future plan language. So that's sort of the minimum that we would expect as part of this process.
And can you describe what buffer means?
Yes, and Mike, you can jump in here too. It means landscaped buffer with potentially fencing if that's something the community would want to see happen. We have no pride of authorship on what that looks like, but it's intended to be a landscape buffer.
And my other question is, can you describe more? I'm having a hard time understanding the position that the new nominations would result in less congestion. I can't visualize that. Can you describe that better for me?
Right. From my perspective, the existing zoning allows up to 850,000 square feet of office, quote unquote, by right, or under our existing. The existing comprehensive plan talks about a primarily office comprehensive plan. Office in general generates more trips compared to residential. So in general, if you're switching the use to more residential, there are less potential trips on the road. But as I think you talked about with the first question, and these are great questions, we need to be able to roll up our sleeves and really answer that, because we know that's a key for how Van Dorn functions right now. And there may be opportunities for other community amenities. I mean, we had initially even thought, could we fit a kiss and ride lot right there, part of the dedicated area? But we're really open to ideas on how to make that issue work better for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
We go to the next one, please.
All right, next is Nathan Uber.
Microphone on.
Yes. Okay, I'm Roger Bullock. I'm at Nathan's house. We're socially distancing the neighbors. And I've got a couple of questions. I just want to make sure I understand the particulars on this. So when I look at what's called the current plan recommendation, it says office use up to 0.5 FAR with an option of some other description up to 1.0 FAR. And then I go over to proposed amendment. I don't see anything about decimal points, either left numbers to the left or right of a decimal point. I see square footage. So I tried my best at my arithmetic. So I multiplied an acre square footage, 43,650 times 12. And I got a number of almost 524,200, 523.8. So when I read that, I don't know what I have under the current recommendation in square footage. Is it 261.9? Is it 523.8? Or is it the sum of 523.8 and 261.9? Because I'm trying to find out what this 850,000 is. I want to know what's the factor of increase that I'm dealing with here. So can somebody clarify that very specifically for me?
Sure, and that's a great question.
It's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, FAR is a one, like you said, 1.0. Your math you're doing is absolutely right. I think the factor that makes it a little bit more nuanced is that we had a zoning. When we zoned our property, we were 17 acres, 17.66. That's where that 850,000 comes from. And we dedicated that FAR, those 5 acres, to the county for transportation improvements that resulted in the signal at Oakwood and part of that flyover ramp onto 95. So that land was dedicated. As part of the process, when you rezone property that way, you're entitled to take what's called density credit for that right of way that was dedicated. So while it is nominally only 12-acre site, we are allowed to take the FAR over the totality of the site. So right now we're zoned 850,000 square feet.
And how much of the 850 has already been absorbed? Or you're saying no, that 850 that was once applied to 17 now applies to 12? Which of
Well,
which is
it always would have applied. It applies to 12 right now. Like if there was demand for office, we would have built 850,000 square feet of office.
okay? Then come back to my original arithmetic, the 0.5 and 1.0. I don't see anything written here on the document that was provided me by the county that talks about 17. I heard you talk about it. I want to know under the current recommendation, and if the county needs to answer this, then the county please answer it. If you don't know, just say you don't know, and then we'll table it as an item to come back. But I want to know how many square feet are involved in the current plan recommendation, not the proposed, but the current.
I'll let staff take their position. My view is we're entitled to 850,000 square feet as the applicant.
That's what the current plan
Well,
means.
if interject, if I understand the questioner correctly, he's trying to understand the change in square footage from what's currently approved to what's being proposed.
This is Mike Linsky from the Department of Planning and Development. That's a little weird of an issue as far as Dave described it. I think density credit is sort of a zoning thing. The comprehensive plan doesn't necessarily take density credit into account. I think at the time they developed that, it was 1.0 FAR for the property, and since then they did the dedication. So it's questionable to me how that would all work in the future going forward, whether they have the right to that sort of under the plan or not. It's a confusing issue, but to me, that's an issue that can be dealt with later if it gets onto the work program. So at this point,
let me tell you, I'm going to jump in here. You know, I'm a resident and I live behind here, and I like my community. I like green space. And I've heard this guy talking tonight. I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but he's affiliated with the developer, the owner, or what have you. But I've heard that this for 30 years, they've been trying to do something and they've been unsuccessful. They failed. And now they're trying to do something. And I heard talk about COVID is a new model, although I don't think COVID was around when this was initially on the docket to be talked about. But I don't know if that's factual or not. But my memory says that it really probably was not a driver for this, but it is something to be considered. But something to be considered is to have a clear understanding for a resident who's going to lose green space, who's going to have the property interrupted with noise. 65-foot buffer is simply the width of my house, not quite the width of my house. That's not a buffer of any significance for me, a homeowner. That's not showing, I understand it's good faith. We don't know what the landscape is. It's all amorphous to me. It lacks definition. It's like an amoeba moving around and nobody's going to give me the answers, but we can table it, learn. I don't want it to go forth until I know these specific answers. But if I calculate right, and look, to me, a 0.5 is 261.9, and now we're dealing with 850,000. That's a factor of 3+. That's a big deal to me. I think I'm looking at the numbers right. And then you start talking about traffic congestion that's going to all. Yep. And so these are.
I want you to be able to, I want you to be able to state everything, but I need
30 seconds, I'll close
you to
it.
finish
I'm
up
saying
here.
These are the drivers of my concerns. And so in the answer of, well, it's confusing, it is confusing. And I just want to know the specifics. And if you don't know it, I tried to preface at the beginning, we don't know, but we're going to table and get back to you. Not at another meeting, but so we can draw up our understanding of what's here. And if we object, we can build a proper cogent argument against it.
Sir, thank you. Let's move on to the next.
No, what are you going to do with my answers to the questions? I don't think my question was answered. So can you tell me what you're going to do?
I could try to, I mean, I don't think Dave can correct me. I don't think the intent is to add intensity to the plan from what there's now. It's really about a higher percentage of residential versus the office and a lower density type of residential than is currently planned. And I have a hard time believing that they could even max out that kind of intensity with that type of residential product anyway, but that they could maybe address that. But I think the intent's not to really raise the intensity, it's really to change the type of development.
Now, that's not, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. That's not the intent. But again, I think the way that.
So we need to move on now.
I understand the way we have 2.5 hours, I think I saw on the schedule.
Sir,
what I'm going to do is that I would like commitment from you that would get some definition on the number.
Move on now. Thank you. Graham, let's go to the next speaker.
The mayor's daughter already won beauty contest. It hadn't been done.
Graham, next.
Okay. Kevin Chen.
Yep. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Thank you very much for taking the time to have this call today. I think, you know, as someone who lives on La Vista and has friends who live on Bush Hill and Clouds Mill, which are adjacent to the parcel, I think one of the kind of like concerns that we have is that there will be, and I did not see this, I'll caveat that I did not see this in any of the documentation or in anyone's presentation, but is there any plans to connect La Vista to Oakwood?
This is David Gill, not with our plans.
Okay, because I think there was a rumor or maybe there was concern that La Vista and Oakwood would be connected and therefore commuters would view our neighborhood as a get to the metro quick path, and that would result in a lot of extra traffic in our neighborhood and possibly, you know, children walking to school being in danger, et cetera. So if that's not on the table, then I'm happy.
That's certainly not our intent with this nomination. I will say, if you look at the old subdivision, there are some leftover parcels that would allow for that connection in the future, which was, I think, the in vogue planning principle at the time, but that's certainly not our intention with our application.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next speaker.
The last, I think we have one more speaker, and it's Randall Davis.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a related question. Is there any plan or any consideration of connecting this lot with Brookland Road?
Again, no, that's not our intent. Oakwood we view as it's part of the TSA and needs to be oriented towards the metro at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
If you want to have some potential pedestrian connection, we'd be open to that if your community was. But that's, as far as vehicular connections, we don't intend to make any.
Thank you.
Do we have any?
Ed, I don't see any additional speakers from the public.
Okay. Good. Then we'll close out that portion and we'll move to discussion among the task force. So is there anyone from the task force itself who wishes to speak?
Right. Yep. It's at least good to take that off the tape. Yeah.
I see at least one hand from Jonna.
Yes. Yeah, may I speak now?
You're doing right now.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't even turn it on. I want to see.
Yeah, because I'm getting a lot of feedback from other sources. Can you hear me?
So it looks like
Could
they,
everybody
they
mute
all live,
themselves unless you're the
but they have to
speaker
be
who's been
like
called on?
homeowners association representatives or something. And
I think that's Lynn Strobel talking.
It's not me.
Should I wait? Ed, do you want to let Lynn?
No, please go ahead. I can
Okay.
hear you. I don't hear any.
I know Dave and Carl and a few of the other guys have been around longer than me on, and particularly this piece of land. And we know that there's bad soil there. But Dave, I just like to throw one thing out. When you said upscale storage, I don't think we we need any more regular storage units. But I think something that if you're going to go storage route, which there's a benefit for that with traffic. I had to do this with a business several years ago. There are when you said upscaled storage, I was hoping you were talking about this, that there, think about businesses who need to have it be airtight, bug tight, watertight for storing files and things. And you might want to consider going into a storage like that. Because like you said, businesses are going to start changing and there may be need to have storage records in humidified controlled environments. So it's, if you're going to go into a storage route thing, that's something that may not be so intense on that bad soil that exists there, as well as the traffic. So I know that's not this. We're not planning here in terms of zoning and that site plan. That's just something I'm going to throw out for consideration. Thank you.
Jonna, we would absolutely welcome that. I think that's a great idea. We hadn't thought about that. I think that'll be a great idea. Carl had also mentioned on the chat about the zoning of the property. I apologize for not mentioning that. The property is zoned currently PDC, which is Planned Development Commercial, which allows office up to, in this case, a 1.0 FAR.
I see Carol and Jane Kelly have their hands up. So let's go first to Carol, then to Jane.
Okay, I'm Carol Al from Brooklyn Bush Hill. And I've met with some of the neighbors, both in Brooklyn Bush Hill and our neighbors in Gunnell Estates. And overall, the sense was that we don't support the change in the comprehensive plan. I was starting with the industrial, which doesn't seem like it's an appropriate use for residential, but is going to be what is being requested to become a predominantly residential community. David mentioned upscale. I don't know what upscale looks like, but from what I've seen with self-storage, they're not attractive. They don't fit with your plan for the type of development you said you were looking to develop. So we don't want to see that. And then from, excuse me, on the undoing the phasing, the concern is, and it's one of the things that the county staff is intended to be mixed use. It needs to be developed in a somewhat phased fashion so that all of the development.
Carol, you sort of broke up there for a minute. Could you go back about 30 seconds? Repeat what you were saying?
How far back? We
Maybe 30 seconds.
Okay. With the phasing is important.
And I'm sorry. Can everybody mute themselves, please, if you're not the speaker who's been called on? That's better. Thank you. Go ahead, Carol.
We don't feel that the industrial use is appropriate within a residential community, which is what we're now looking at. And it's very inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. I've read through several sections and I can't find one instance where industrial is recommended or suggested as an accepted use in a residential mixed use community. With respect to the phasing, if this is intended to be mixed use, we would like to see some of the non-residential uses built out before the residential is completely phased in. So we don't support the changes to the comp plan. Moving this from office to residential is a significant, we feel, has a much more significant impact on us than the office. Office use is opposite direction from into the community when we're leaving in the morning. They're leaving when we come back. What you're doing with residential is adding, and we're looking at the volumes, at least 1,000 people, adding significantly to the rush hour traffic morning and night, not lessening the traffic, because it's the same direction and competing with us for traffic on Thorn and for seats on the metro. The other thing with residential is that it's not a 5-day-a-week use. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we're going to have people competing with us on Van Dorn, not only during the commute time, but on the weekend. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Van Dorn, but it's not atypical on a Saturday for a trip up Van Dorn to take 30 minutes from Franconia to Etzel Road. I mean, 30 minutes is very common on a Saturday. So you'll be adding congestion to the already crowded road without any improvements to the intersections at the Beltway or Franconia. Another thing is with residential, and these are significantly decent sized units, especially the townhouses, you're going to have families. Families mean children. Children mean schools. And I don't know what schools the county would envision these students going to, but Van Dorn, Bush Hill Elementary School is already overcrowded. We are in the process of implementing advanced studies in the school. It's not finished yet because it's phased 1 grade a year, which resulted in a significant number of students added to the school. We now have trailers for classrooms, more teachers, not enough parking. They're now parking on our neighborhood streets during the school day, not to mention the additions of buses and the addition of parents' cars bringing their children to school and dropping them off, which raises another concern based on that, is the concern of the neighbors that once this development is built out, it may not be the plan of the developers and the owners currently to connect the roads, but there would be a significant push on the county by the parents to put a connecting road to get their kids to school in a to basically facilitate getting their children to school. I was pleased to see that David, that your plan says it will maintain the 65-foot buffer. What I don't see is the maintenance of the line of sight. There was a documented, stipulated line of sight in the approved plan for the PDC development. And I'm pleased to see the commitment to protecting the land around what would be part of open space required by the resource protection area. So that was positive. And then the other issue is potential stormwater management based on topology. Our community in many cases is at a higher elevation than Oakwood, and the stormwater natural runoff is toward and onto the Oakwood properties. So those are our concerns with residential versus the stormwater would be anything, but some of the concerns that we have with the modification from residential to residential from commercial. Thank you.
Carol, I really appreciate those comments. I mean, I think, to be perfectly candid, they're not a surprise. These are issues that I think your community's had consistently with how this property moves forward. Line of sight, you're 100% right. I just want to get into the details of the zoning. We're absolutely going to keep that line of sight issue. And frankly, our hope would be if we do go into a comprehensive plan process, we can come up with a better way than that line of sight to achieve even potentially lower heights for your community moving forward. If it's not all office, we can probably look at how those heights are, maybe making a better buffer, maybe opening up that RPA for park, and frankly, maybe even coming up with ways to address stormwater.
Okay. I do have a question. In your application, you don't stipulate an estimated number of units for townhouses. looking at the numbers you gave, there could be, if you did it all townhouse, it would be about 255 townhouses. If it was all low-level, or they're not high-rise, but mid-rise buildings, it could be 1,000 units. Do you have a sense of how you plan to split that out?
Right. So if we waved a magic wand today, I think it's going to be much more towards the townhouse side of things. And, that's certainly where I think the market is right now. But we wanted to make sure we had all the tools to address what we heard from the community is concerned. If you guys want to see more on the townhome side, I think we would absolutely be open to that as part of this process.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Jane Kelly? Jane, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I think my question is for David Gill. I'm new to this, so potentially when it was going to be office space, how high would the buildings have been? And now it's going to residential, and so it possibly would go down to three-floor townhouses then?
Correct.
And before, when it was going to be office space,
8 stories was what the existing approval.
Okay, so in that sense, it's kind of it's a little better for the neighborhood. There won't be as much blockage or going into the adjoining neighborhoods.
That's our intent, is to work with the community to figure out what makes for a better plan, given some of this context and background. I mean, it is planned 50-50 residential office right now. We think there's a better way to skin that cat, proverbially, and want to work with the community on doing it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else from the task force who wants to ask a question or make a statement? I'm not seeing any hands.
I don't know how to do one. Can I make a statement?
Sure, who's speaking? Oh.
It's Tom Rickard over at Jefferson Manor.
Sure. Go ahead.
One of my constituents said that Fairfax County DOT had some CIP funds to study a bridge connection in this area. And that would be something I'd like to hear from the county about it, if there's anything going on with that. The other comment is that the county bicycle master plan between Oakwood Drive and La Vista, which is adjacent to the property, needs to be completed. The connection is currently unpaved. It's technically walkable, but unmarked and difficult for people using strollers or bikes, and almost impossible for people with different abilities. That would be something, because really connecting to the metro at the end of the day has got to be addressed. Like they're crossing the Beltway. So those are 2 comments I'd like to hear some feedback on. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mike Linsky from Planning and Development. I'm not up on all the transportation improvements going on in that area, but Dave might know more about this. I think there's some money allocated to improve Van Dorn Street under the interstate. I'm not sure about that. The sidewalks. I don't think it was a new bridge. I mean, that's in the plan, but it's not. There's no funding for that at this point. But as far as the bicycle connections, that's something that can be looked at during the plan amendment process if it gets on the work program. And also, there's actually an update to the whole. It's called the Active Fairfax to the county bike plan. It's going to be integrated more with the trails plan and pedestrian plan. So there's some updates to that whole planning process going on, and that'll be a time to look at the different connections like that too, to see if they make sense or not. So there's multiple opportunities for that to be looked at.
And Tom, this is Graham. I was just chatting privately with one of our FCDOT members, staff members, and they're indicating that there's no funding currently for the bridge.
Well, is there funds for a study is what my understanding.
Let's see if we can get Tom real quick. Hang on one second. He's indicating no, there's not.
Well, then I had a bad rumor, but that would be, this would be a great place to have a pedestrian crossing if you're going to link the Vine Street stuff with this, these two nominations and the Metro being there, because everyone else is going to, you know, it's going to stress the roads. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Ed, just real quick on that, Tom, there is, as Mike mentioned, though, funds to look at how to make the sidewalk underneath 495 work better. And there is a study for that, that my understanding is ongoing right now by SCDOT. Tom Burke may be able to weigh in on that as well. And then we'd be open for whatever pedestrian bicycle connections make sense with the community. We think more connections, the better, obviously, to be able to use and maximize Metro.
Well, I think if you could get from your development to the Metro without using a car, it'd be a big selling point.
Absolutely, absolutely. It'd be, and make everything easier from our end.
Yep. That, you know, the transit-oriented developments, part of it's based on leaving the car at home.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
There was an improvement made to the walkway under the belt would go, but it's still not very pleasant. So for whatever that's worth, that was done. So is there anyone else who wishes to speak about this nomination at this point?
I have one comment. This is Carol.
Okay, Carol, go ahead.
With respect to pedestrian access to the Metro, there has been talk for many decades, and before the Westchester Barbmore area was built, there was talk about building a path from Westchester that would connect through Oakwood to the Beltway. And the path from Westchester to Oakwood, and I don't know how far down it goes, was built. It is there. It hasn't been well maintained. And one of the questions we would have would be, would that connectivity connect? I believe the David's application did mention a walkway from their community to the Beltway, and what would be what would be of interest would be to have it connect to the path that's already there from Westchester.
We'd support that as well, Carol.
So if there's nobody else who wants to speak on this nomination, I think it's we will hold off any motions or votes until the end of the night after we discuss the next nomination. And I think it's time to go there to the next nomination.
And very briefly, I also wanted to mention there are a couple of things in the chat function that I just wanted to briefly mention. We have for one of the attendees, Alexis Glenn, said she'd like to hear more about the economic and other benefits that attracting more talented and enthusiastic neighbors to our community, rather than just seeing people solely as costs or barriers. Just noting that we're talking about people. And then also from Carl Sell, he was noting that townhouses would be a considerable downzoning, and why are they asking for increased FAR?
We aren't asking for increased FAR. I want to make that 100% clear. No increase in FAR at the end of the day.
David, do you have anything any response?
Oh, sorry.
Ms. Glenn, Alexis Glenn, I said I'd like to hear more about economic and other benefits. Attracting more talented.
We look. I'm coming from this side of the industry, so we always think there are significant economic benefits to putting a property like this close to Metro in terms of investment in the community. Again, looking at potential home ownership, which are, buy into the community, become members of the PTA, and really become the backbone of the community. So we certainly support those efforts. Typically, though, as we all know, economic development is not part of the calculus here, and it's really about planning and looking at what's the right plan long term. So I'd rather we get there on that plan language than get hung up on the economic development side.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next.
Ed,
Yes, Carl?
he said they were not asking for increased FAR, but the document I have in front of me says they are. I'd like to be clear about that. The staff document says they want to go from a 0.5 to a possible 1 to a total 1.5.
So this gets into, Carl, the discussion I was having where we are zoned for 850,000 square feet right now. We dedicated 5 acres of our original 17 acres with that rezoning to the county for FAR for right-of-way that they still own and still have, and in fact, even used a portion of for the affordable senior housing project.
And
What
you
the right FAR
dedicated,
number is relative to the existing either zoning or plan recommendation, I'm not sure. I'd rather we focus on trying to figure out what the right use mix is and figure out how to make that work at the end of the day. Our intent, and I'll say this again, not to increase the FAR. So if staff comes and tells us it's only, X square feet, we'll work with that. But again, our goal is to move forward the discussion in a way that actually makes this property become a benefit to the community in the long term.
I went through this rezoning twice in the 80s and the 90s, and it's very complicated. No question about it. And I don't remember it as accurately as I would like to. But I would like to see the zoning, the final approval of the zoning, and try to compare it to what you're asking for before. I know there was some dedication of right of way for the off ramps and that sort of things, but I'm not clear whether you got density credit for that or you were paid for it or what particular happened. And that has a bearing on what we're doing here tonight.
Right. So, Carl, you're exactly right that it was very nuanced. I don't want to waste everyone's time on getting into the nuts and bolts. But in 1992, the county initiated potentially condemning these 5 acres.
Yes.
The applicant instead decided to go through a rezoning and reached a compromise agreement with the county in relation to that dedication to keep the density credit. And so I'm happy to forward you that agreement and the original zoning that allocates the 850,000 square feet to the 12 acres, including proffers and all that, and staff report and all the supporting materials.
We're really running up against it here. We're obviously going to go over what I hoped would be the 9 o'clock conclusion tonight. We need to move on to the next presentation. So let's move on to the.
Okay, this is Mike Linsky again. I should be able to share, I believe, or Graham might have to give me access again.
Yeah, just 1 second, Mike.
Yeah.
And my apologies to anyone who has trouble staying after 9 o'clock, but
okay, here
we're learning how to do this here.
Okay, this second presentation should be up, and it looks very similar to the previous presentation. So there's a lot of similarities, obviously. So this is for site-specific plan amendment nomination PC 19-LE-009, which concerns the property located just east of the one we were just discussing in the Van Dorn Transit Station area. So this is 18.5 acres of civil properties. It's consisting of 18 separate parcels fronting on both sides of Oakwood Road. And this makes up the remainder of land unit D of the Van Dorn Transit Station area. So between the two nominations, we have all of land unit D that we're talking about. So these parcels are either vacant or contain various commercial or industrial uses. Let's see. And we talked about before Interstate 495 forming an effective barrier between land unit D south and land unit E south of Interstate 495 and the transit station and the rest of the TSA. Let's see, this property is approximately 1.2 miles by car or 0.7 miles by foot to the transit station, going up Van Dorn Street to Eisenhower Avenue. So to the south and east of land unit D are areas planned and developed as low-density residential neighborhoods. And there's additional undeveloped land in land unit E to the east, which is at the end of Oakland Road, which is planned for low to medium intensity office uses, and that would also access off of Oakland Road. So these properties have the same comprehensive plan recommendation as the last nomination, which applies to all of land unit B. Actually, they have a different baseline recommendation. Some of these are, between all these parcels, there's planning for either 0.25 to 0.5 floor area ratio at the baseline level. I think office or industrial, depending on which parcel you're talking about. But the ultimate development option is for all of land unit D is the 1.0 mixed use development of office, hotel, and retail uses with the same potential for residential use, but only a phase to ensure a mix of both residential and non-residential uses. And this has the same sort of limitation that because of limited road capacity and connectivity to the transit station, the plan limits development in all land unit D to the baseline level until there's adequate roadway and transit access. And then the ultimate vision for the TSA as a whole is a bridge from Pine Street to Oakwood Road. So these parcels propose a similar option for mixed use development as the previous nomination, to 1.0 floor area ratio on the property, with residential as a primary use. And this one proposes office, industrial, or institutional uses as potential secondary use. This one would also support 50 to 75% of the total development as residential use, consisting of townhomes and low density multifamily housing. And it also proposes the elimination of the plan condition requiring residential development to be phased with non-residential development. So we have the same concern with these two nominations as far as looking at them, either of them on their own would have challenged the larger area south of 495 to realize the adopted plan. And if you take one in isolation, the other one would retain the current plan. But looking at them both in conjunction gives you an opportunity to look at the whole area. So that's what we're ultimately recommending. Because as we talked about, the Vine Street area north of 495 and portions of landing to the east, they all rely on common transportation connections to this area and coordinated planning. So you really need to look at it in the bigger picture. Also developing lower density residential uses and self-storage uses into the mix of land units as proposed could work against the area-wide goal if not considered within the context of a larger area. So let's see. I'll go to our recommendation. So for these reasons, staff finds the nomination problematic when looked at in isolation. But as we already looked at, PC 19-LE-006 proposes a similar residential mixed use plan recommendation. So we recognize that considering the entirety of land unit D may enable a comprehensive review of this area. So in short, as David pointed out, there's been issues developing the plan to its fullest potential for the last 20-something years. So, it makes sense at some level to look at replanning the area somewhat, but we weren't comfortable looking at individual pieces of it in isolation. So I think we're more comfortable if we can get the whole area in to look at, then it's a more valid study, a more comprehensive study. So therefore, PC 19-LE-009 is recommended to be added to the comprehensive plan amendment work program to be reviewed concurrently with PC 19-LE-006 as part of a larger study of land unit E and the northern portion of land unit E of the Van Dorn Transit Station area. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn? Lynn Strobel?
Yes, here. And Graham,
Sorry to make you wait so long.
Not a problem. And Graham, I wondered if you could put up my presentation for me. I would appreciate that.
Sure, just one second.
Great.
Okay, Can you see it, Lee?
I can.
And everyone else?
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. And I'm here this evening to discuss a nomination that's been filed on approximately 18 acres. It's actually 18 different parcels that are proximate to the Van Dorn Metro Station. And it is immediately, this parcel is immediately to the east of the nomination that was just being discussed by David. And I really appreciate actually the opportunity to go second, because I think that he provided some very valuable background on this area. I think he noted that nothing has happened on this property, in spite of the fact that the property owner that he represents secured a zoning for that property a number of years ago. And I think that hopefully working together by bringing all of these parcels together for consideration, we can come up with something that will hopefully fulfill the vision of a transit-oriented development that was in the original plan. So if we could go to the next slide, please.
1 second, sorry.
No problem. So I've just put up here just an overall zoning map of the area. And you can see that I've outlined the property that's the subject to the nomination. The property that David was discussing, as you see, is immediately to the east and zoned PDC. So this nomination is filed on both the north and the south sides of Oakwood Road. The existing zoning includes a little bit of everything. It's a mix of commercial and industrially zoned properties. There's actually one property in the middle that is zoned R3, like the adjacent residential community. And you may or may not be able to notice this, but there were several commercial rezonings that were approved on the south side of Oakwood Road. But again, like the property to the east, these parcels really have not been developed up to their potential. There are definitely challenges on these parcels. There are challenges including topography. You've got the condition of Oakwood Road. You have the impacts of 495. But I will say that it does have proximity to the transit station, and we think that there are some opportunities here. So if we go to the next slide. And I apologize, I know that this is kind of dark, it's difficult to see, but what I'm hoping is you can notice is that it's really the properties that are on the north side of Oakwood Road that are primarily developed. And if we go to the next slide, I've got just some photographs of those existing conditions, and we can go to the next slide. And as we're looking at these, I hope it's evident that the property, again, has not really been developed in accordance with what we think of when we think of transit station areas and transit-oriented development. As David mentioned, there have been amendments to the comprehensive plan in Tysons, Ruston, other areas, recognizing the fact that that mixed use is appropriate proximate to the transit station, and that goal and objective has not been fulfilled here. We have not created a sense of place, and we haven't really achieved those same objectives that we've seen in other parts of the county as we see here. In fact, nothing has been done, and we can go to the next slide. Nothing has been done to implement the comprehensive plan development potential. And I think it's been about 30 years, and that is because of existing limitations in the comprehensive plan text. So what the nominator is asking for is an amendment to that comprehensive plan text to facilitate a mixed-use development. Currently, there is plan text language that refers to an intensity up to a 1.0 FAR. We're not asking to modify that development potential. We go to the next slide. Our proposal, as I mentioned, is for mixed-use development. We've provided some language that's very similar to the nomination to the west. We want to maintain, as I mentioned, the current intensity recommendation, but allowing us the flexibility to create a viable mixed-use development. We do think that this is an opportunity to comprehensively evaluate and plan over 18 acres that's proximate to the metro rail station. When you combine this with the property that's to the east, you're closer to 30 acres. And we really want to do this with community input. And I think that that's already been mentioned this evening, but I know that the community does have concerns regarding this nomination and regarding the nomination that was just presented. I saw some of those concerns that were posted on the county website, but I want to emphasize, as David did, that this is the first step in a very long process. During that process, there will be an evaluation of all of the identified concerns. We'll be taking a look at traffic. We'll be taking a look at noise, impacts on schools. All of those things will be considered. So the only thing that we're really asking for is to be a part of a process that we can allow that discussion to occur. And we want to do that in conjunction with the community. So that's really all that I wanted to present this evening. Again, this is the first step, and asking that we be allowed to be a part of this plan process that will help us identify the best uses for this site, not only for the property owners, but for the community as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. So we'll now open it up to members of the public. Anyone who has a comment or a question from the public, not necessarily land use or task force members.
So Ed, this is Graham. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. We have two hands up. I think one of them is from Alexis. I'm not sure if she put her hand down for the previous one, but Alexis, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. That's from the previous. Apologies.
Okay. No, it's okay. And then we have another from the person, I didn't actually catch his name, but at Nathan Uber's house.
No, this time it really is Nathan Uber.
Excuse me.
We want the other guy.
I'm just keeping you all on your toes. I heard from Lynn and Gil, I think, I'm sorry, David and Lynn, that this is a transit-oriented development. We keep throwing in the proximity to the metro station. I mean, my house is on the border of the 009 parcel, so I'm in like the exact same spot, and we are not proximate to the metro station. It's quite a hassle to get there. You have to drive, or you have to ride your bike and get pretty sweaty. And there's like, I mean, it's absolutely not a transit-oriented location. So what are you changing on? What do you envision changing to make it a transit-oriented location?
Well, I think that we feel that this would be, and I'm sorry, Mike, did you want to comment on that? I saw that you had a comment go up. Mike Linsky?
Yeah, I was just typing up the answer to that, actually. I mean, that'll be part of the overall discussion if a plan amendment moves forward, as far as, what type of development might be appropriate in that area with different types of connections, if the current plan makes sense or doesn't make sense or whatever. All those kind of things will be up for discussion if it gets into the plan amendment stage, but it'll be looked at holistically at least.
And I would say that the current plan refers to it as a transit station area. And I think, as Mike said, I think if we can enhance the connectivity, I do think it can relate to the metro station.
I think also, though, the current plan has that phasing guidance in there specifically for this region, so that it doesn't get super dense with no connections to transit built in. I mean, you mentioned building the office use or the residential use, and that's part of the phasing as well. But your proposals both uniformly want to remove the phasing guidance. And it seems like that might be a mistake if we're not thinking about how to make this truly a transit-oriented parcel before we add all the density to it.
Well, I would say that maybe there's some phasing that would make sense, but the current language that's in the plan today, I believe, has precluded any sort of development in accordance with the plan. So we really want to take a look at that and see if there are opportunities to modify that phasing. Maybe there we suggested no specific phasing requirement, you know, maybe there is some phasing that would be appropriate, but certainly what is in the plan now is not allowing for development, reasonable development.
And I guess, I mean, as we move forward, if lower density residential is deemed to be appropriate in certain areas, maybe it's not all transit oriented development anymore. That could be, I mean, that's the plan now, but obviously there's a barrier to transit. So it's, I mean, there's a question of either you create better access to transit or possibly maybe that's not even feasible. So, you know, all that would be part of the discussion, I guess, if it gets to that point.
Ed, we have one additional speaker, Ann Bloss. And if you can hear us, go ahead.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ann. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just wanted to make two observations. Before I say that, I wanted to point out that I recognize the owners of that area are seeking a positive way forward. Ms. Strobel pointed out the goal of having a sense of place. And I do appreciate that both of the proposals genuinely seek that sense of place. I have two comments that I might say are counter observations. The first is the comprehensive plan doesn't create the impediment to development. Both nominations pointed out the lack of development and could create the appearance that you might want to blame the comprehensive plan. I argue the comprehensive plan doesn't create the impediment to development, it reflects the impediment. The impediment is congestion, and the comprehensive plan is an effort to address that very problem. So that's one observation I just wanted to share. And my second observation goes back to the importance of phasing. Other people have said that, and I'll throw my hat in also. Both nominations advocate mixed-use development. There's a lot of language in both nominations that are very favorable about the mixed-use environment. But that then should be the advocate for mixed-use development. That should be phased development to ensure that mixed use does result. So that's just two observations that I wanted to point out. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public who wishes to speak?
Ed, I don't see any additional speakers.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we move to the task force then. Anyone from the task force wishing to speak?
Ed.
Hello.
Ed.
Who's speaking?
It's Carl, Ed.
Okay, Carl. Go ahead, Carl. You're muted, Carl. We can't hear you.
That last lady that spoke must be a planner.
Carl, we just heard the last few words. So I think maybe you were saying a lot that we didn't hear. You're muted again. Carl, we can't hear you.
How about now?
Now we can hear you.
I'm electronically challenged.
All right, go ahead.
All I wanted to say was that last lady that spoke must be a planner.
Okay. She was very well spoken.
Ed, this is Tom Sachs.
Go ahead, Tom.
Is it too early to propose a motion?
I would like to make a comment and ask a couple of questions to Lynn.
Okay, Carol.
Lynn, obviously we have the same concerns with your application as we did with David's. I have two questions. One, this is a number of parcels of land. Are they going to be consolidated and developed as a single parcel, or as individual parcels with individual owners working together?
I represent a number of the owners. I do not represent all of the owners, although the people that I'm working with have talked to, I think, almost all of the individuals along Oakwood Road. What I would say is that I anticipate that probably going through the plan process, there would probably be some language about, a certain minimum amount of consolidation. So we'll certainly have to work through that as we go through this process. But we certainly would have to consolidate enough land area to make sense.
Okay. And in looking at your map, I realized that my comment about the footpath from Westchester that would get through to Oakwood goes through the properties that you're representing, not the ones that David presented. So hopefully if there's some connectivity, we would be looking at that.
Yes, happy to discuss those types of issues with the community.
And I appreciate the grid with all of the property owners and sizes and zoning, because it eliminated my need to go and update my spreadsheet from 2000.
There you go.
Thank you.
I'm sure Lynn aims to please.
I do.
All right. Anyone else have a comment or question?
Jonna has her hand up.
Well, then, Jonna, go ahead.
Well, you weren't recognizing me. I just,
I didn't see.
hands that never go down.
Sorry.
That's okay. I just have a comment, and it may be I missed something, but why are these two sites not working, especially on the south side of Oakwood there? Is there any possibility that it together their land would equal something better than two separate applicants?
That's why we're.
Well, I think that's why the staff would like for this to be looked at all together. So I definitely envision that Dave and I will be working together.
And we certainly support that from our end as well.
Thank you.
Okay, did Rand Pixa, do you have your hand up?
I do, Ed.
Go ahead.
Notwithstanding the cooperative view from the two parcel representatives, we take the view, however, that the bundling together is somewhat unfortunate because the circumstances of the two parcels is somewhat different. One has problematic development in place, and that may create its own impetus, whereas the other parcel does not. And therefore, there may be a reason to deal with one before the other. Separate from that, however, as a general proposition, we in Claremont Woods are of the view that anything that increases density in Lee District is problematic. All you have to do is look at the traffic congestion and the civic burden or civic load, if you will, on infrastructure generally. And therefore, particularly problematic with both proposals is the notion of removing phased development. We see as troublesome the development at all, because anything that increases from the present almost untenable situation, the congestion problem is problematic. But phased development with a more commercial bent, obviously, for I believe Carol pointed out, shifts the residential traffic problem to the worst rush hour that we have now. Also is the notion of this rush to clearly move to residential development without tying those communities to the transit area. And most telling there was the bridge. So I urge all of the other panelists, when the time comes, to consider those views and perhaps join us in a vote against moving these forward. Because, as Lynn Strobel points out, this is the first step, and this is therefore a very good time to address those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Did Jane Kelly have her hand up?
No,
I think they've never come down from the first time.
I see. Okay. So, Is there anyone else wishing to make a comment or ask a question?
And it looks like Tom Rickert has his hand up.
Yeah, I see that. Tom?
Unmuted, thank you. I had just wanted to point out to, I guess it's Michael, I found here in the Fairfax County adopted 2021 to 25 capital improvement program on page 213, item 12, under transportation planning studies. Countywide, there's $1.12 million for studying. The third item is a construction feasibility study for the connector between Oakwood Road and Vine Street over 495.
Okay.
There's money for a study.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. That's news to me, actually, that there's
Well,
money allocated,
it's on page
potential money.
213. So maybe that could work into this whole, making the site more connected to Metro and a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's got to be part of the discussion. I mean, if not just for these parcels, it's kind of critical to the parcels on Vine Street to develop. So that's what kind of complicates things a little with, just trying to replan this area. This area could maybe, like I said, there's potential for it to not be transit-oriented development if it makes sense, other than you need to have the connection for the properties to the north too. So it's all tied together. So that's where it gets complicated, obviously, which it's been forever, but all that stuff would be hashed out in a future plan amendment. So the question here is just whether you guys see enough merit to go forward and restudy the area, or just live under the current plan and wait and hope that
there's some other,
there's
some other items mentioned in that paragraph. It seems like if somebody doesn't try and start this study, the money's going to be used up on these other items. So I would suggest for your consideration that, connecting these two parcels does make through transit oriented on the south side. And if there's county money to study it, then ask the county to study it. So thank you.
I'll check back up. I'm sure somebody's looking at it. I'll make sure we connect.
It'd be neat to have that as part of this discussion.
So this is Graham. One thing that we could do if there's interest in the task force is, the task force has the ability to suggest specific things in their motion and their votes if they wish to do so. So that could, if there was interest in adding this to the work program, that specific item could be something that's transmitted to the Planning Commission if the task force decided to do so.
Well, that's what I would suggest, but it's up to the entire task force.
Right. Tom, I think you just put your hand up.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yep.
Okay, I think the time is right, since I don't think there's anybody else wishing to speak. So please make a motion.
I am also very
remember there are two cases to make motions on.
Right. I'm very concerned about the phasing, but I think the time to look at that is when the staff is doing a review of the comprehensive area plan. So I recommend moving the basically the same motion for both, since they're being considered together, that we accept the staff's language of the proposed amendment with the addition of adding the bridge over 495 be considered with that.
Okay, so
I second that motion.
So what we're doing, who was the second?
Leah.
Leah, okay. So the motion, as I understand it, is to recommend to the Planning Commission that each of these two proposals, each of these two nominations be included in the work program, with the proviso that the work program also be looking or studying the possibility of the pedestrian bridge over the Beltway from Oakwood to Vine Street. Did I capture that right, Tom?
Right. And then for people who are concerned about phasing, that could be dealt with through the proffer process when we get to that point.
So you don't believe that the phasing should be especially pointed out in our recommendation to the planning commission?
Just that phasing can be something that we've paid special attention to when we get to rezoning and other approvals.
I have a question on his motion. I'm not sure what I'm voting on. My understanding was that what we were to do today was to make a recommendation that these be accepted for more in-depth review, not that we accept any language or with or without phasing or anything else. That basically what we want, we're not making any decision as to whether or not phasing is eliminated or industrial is appropriate, that all we're doing is making a recommendation that, similar to what the staff did, is that we move this forward to the next phase. No approvals of anything would take place and no changes would be made based on a decision tonight to go forward.
That is what I meant,
correct,
Carol.
Okay, that's not how I interpret it. So
Okay.
And
Right.
Carol,
That's why I
Tom,
tried to rephrase Tom's motion a little bit.
Let me rephrase it.
and this is Graham, just one point of clarification regarding the bridge. The bridge that's called for in the plan is a vehicular bridge to connect Vine and Oakwood Road. So if there's interest in a vehicular bridge versus a pedestrian bridge, I think that would want to be a part of your motion as you make it.
That was my mistake. I'm sorry.
Let me rephrase. What I wanted to do is recommend we follow the preliminary staff recommendation that both parcels together be recommended to be added to the comprehensive plan amendment work program. With the understanding that we're also going to want them to look at the vehicular bridge connection between Oakwood and Vine.
Ed?
Yeah, I'm just jotting that down. Both parcels added to the program with a recommendation that the vehicular bridge between Oakwood and Vine be added as well.
But not just that both be added, but they be reviewed concurrently.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
That the two parcels be reviewed concurrently.
This is Mike Linsky from Planning and Development. I have a suggestion. I mean, if you're comfortable enough with our recommendation language, you could just move to endorse that language, or to use the same language with the addition of the pedestrian or the vehicular bridge or something like that. So you don't have to restate it all. Just a suggestion.
I don't have the staff recommendation in front of me, but I think I've captured it. You tell me if I did or not. Both parcels we recommend that both parcels concurrently be added to the work program with the recommendation that the vehicular bridge be added as well.
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Excuse me. The thing I was referring to on page 213 says a construction feasibility study for a connector between Oakwood Road and Vine Street over 495. It doesn't say vehicular, it doesn't say pedestrian. It says connector. And in my mind, I wasn't talking about a bridge for cars. You've got the exit right down the street there. This would connect this transit-oriented, now residential development to the metro. Bicycles, foot strollers, that's what you need to do to make it transit-oriented south of the Beltway.
Or you need to improve the vehicular access also for shuttle buses and things like that.
But it does. You don't want it to make it into a cut through. for the, you know, the poor folks that live there. But if it was like designated for the, like of Montebello, whatever, they have a metro shuttle.
Yeah.
But these are things we could figure out later, but I'm not, I didn't propose a vehicular bridge. And the money I found for a study talks about a connector, not, it doesn't say vehicular, it just says a connector, and it's a study. So that's what I wanted to throw in there. Thank you.
If you want to make that as an amendment to my motion, I'd accept it.
This is Graham. Just to clarify one thing, in terms of the comprehensive plan versus the CIP, I think it's important to understand and make sure that we have clarification from the group in terms of what the bridge is. In the transportation plan, this is envisioned as a vehicular bridge. There might be a sidewalk or something that is along that bridge, but it is envisioned and shown on the transportation plan map as vehicular. Not in the trails and bicycle plans with the county, but whether it's in the CIP or not. So Tom might be correct in the sense of the CIP, but what we're looking at is the comprehensive plan language and how that might be reviewed.
Right, and in the Van Dorn Transit section of the comprehensive plan, it's referenced as a vehicle bridge to connect Vine and Oakwood.
I'll add another little wrinkle. This is Mike from the Planning and Development. I think the Vine Street language mentions the vehicular connection because it would rely on that, but the recommendation for land unit D doesn't specifically say vehicular. It just mentions that there needs to be, I don't have the exact language here, but additional road capacity. It mentions specifically pedestrian connectability too. So I think it's sort of left open for, so there might be a situation where maybe to develop south of 495, you just need a pedestrian connection to make it make sense. And then when Vine Street develops, more of a vehicular bridge is put in, or it could be any combination of that type of thing. So I think
So let me state what I believe is the current state of the motion, and Tom, I ask you to tell me if I've got this right. The motion would be that both parcels or both nominations be studied, both nominations be added to the work program to be studied concurrently with a recommendation that a connector from Oakwood Road to Vine Street be studied as well.
Correct.
Okay, and I believe Leah was the second. Is that acceptable to Leah?
Yes, it is.
Ed?
Yes.
This is Carl.
Yes, Carl.
I'm uncomfortable moving forward with this because this property, particularly in the one next to South Van Dorn Street, is zoned. And there's nothing brought up tonight that new by the citizens or members of the task force. And I don't think that most people understand that that particular property is zoned, and a lot of the issues that they're concerned about are in that zoning. And I would like for everybody to be able to recognize that, see that before we move ahead with a comprehensive plan amendment to make sure we don't miss anything. And it doesn't see, I don't have the feeling that people understand that this property is zoned and there are conditions of the zoning, including phasing, that would have to be changed in a subsequent rezoning. So I think we need to take some more time on this.
Carl, I disagree with you. I do understand
I'm
those
sure
things,
you do.
and we'll have an opportunity to vote on the rezoning if it comes to that.
And it's important to remember that what we're voting on is simply a recommendation to study. We're not voting on an approval.
This is Graham. One more thing. Part of the staff recommendation had to deal with land unit E, which is immediately to the east of PC 19-LEE 9, And so I was wondering if Mike Lindsay, if you're on the call, if you could explain the substance of our recommendation and as it regards to land unit E, just to make sure that everybody on the task force understands that.
Yeah, I guess versus the very northern portion of land unit E still remains undeveloped and would be accessed off of Oakwood Road, and there's a recommendation there for office use. So I think we just added that to the recommendation. It's not part of the nomination area, but I think if we're going to look at all of land unit D, that should be part of the study area as well. So we just added that to our recommendation that be part of the study area.
Add land unit. I'm sorry.
It's the northern portion of land unit E that's not developed up against the interstate.
Mike, I can make you the presenter if you want to display this.
Let's see.
11.
Help, I can.
Would this future bridge be part of land unit E?
It would be right in that area
Would,
between,
yes.
you know, it's anywhere in that area, I guess. I'm not sure if that's totally accurate, but.
So, Tom, do we include the language about land unit E in the motion?
My preference would be not to include it because it's really not that close to Van Dorn, or it looks like it's totally different development conditions there, knowing the land.
Well, it's your motion. Okay.
Yeah, I would rather not include it unless there's strong objection.
Excuse me, this is Megan Van Dam from the Department of Planning and Development. May I say a few words about that?
Of course, go ahead.
So the intent about including land unit E, it's not necessarily at this point to make a recommendation to change the land use or to change the transportation recommendations. However, because the recommendation involves, for land unit E, involves the consolidation, it says you can potentially consolidate with land unit D, transfer development rights to it. I think at a minimum, we might want to look at cleaning that up if the second option is added to the plan so that it would be clearer about whether or not that consolidation option would include in the potential transfer of development rights, whether that would also apply to any potential new option on land unit B for the residential and mixed use concept that's proposed here. So I think we want to make sure that we at least have some flexibility to go into land unit E to say, you know, this option for consolidation is really only applicable if you're building office. You know, so I think we just need to make sure that that's we can do something with that.
So Megan, your preference would be that the northern portion of land unit E be included in this recommendation?
Yes, and again, not necessarily assuming that we're going to go in and change the land uses or change the program that's planned there, but really to make sure if we need to clarify that that consolidation option is for the office, that we have the ability to do that, and we don't need to go to the board to ask for an amendment to the authorization for this plan amendment.
Megan, this is Carol Allen. Is land unit, that portion of land unit E zoned for office?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. It's either office or industrial.
This is Tom. I know one point we approved a skating rink for there.
Tom, this is David Gill. I actually represented Kettler at the time on that. It's zoned IL. It is site plan for 2 office buildings, and IL is an odd zoning. And we had come back and talked about the indoor skating rink idea at one point.
Right.
Well, Tom, I guess it's back to you in terms of your motion.
That makes sense. So we add the undeveloped portions of land unit E.
Okay.
Wait a minute, what did you just say, Tom? E?
Yeah, the undeveloped portions. That's just to the east of the 009 parcel.
The language used by previously was the northern portion of land unit E.
Yeah.
Your preference would be the undeveloped portion?
Well, that's what's showing on the slide.
How
with
should
the bridge?
What's the preferred language?
The map says alternate uses 11A.
I'm at a loss because what I'm looking at says the undeveloped portion of land unit E.
I'm looking at the map I downloaded from Fairfax.
Well, I'm looking at the slide that's on the screen right now.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
text on the screen.
This is, yeah, Mike, again, I think it says one thing on the map and another thing on the recommendation, but it could be either really, the northern portion or the undeveloped portion. It's just whatever you prefer.
If you say the northern, it'll be correct.
Fine, then let's use northern. I don't see a difference. It's not worth arguing about.
All right, so here's what I currently have.
Ed, can I, this is John, does our planning commissioner who is on this task force and I think is here, does he understand what we're trying to say? Since he's going to probably have to be taking it forward.
He's not technically part of the task force, but he is in the meeting as far as I know.
This is Mike again. How about you could say the undeveloped northern portion? Still two birds with one stone.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So here's what I have for the motion. That we recommend that both nominations be added to the work program to be studied concurrently, with the recommendation that a connector from Oakwood Road to Vine Street be studied along with the undeveloped northern portion of land unit E.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, so is everyone clear on what the motion is? There are nobody saying that they're not clear. I guess I better double check with our seconder. Leah, are you good with this?
Yeah, I think I have all the revisions of the revisions of the revisions.
Okay. So my initial intention was to have two separate votes, but given where we're at, I think we will do one vote for this motion to cover both nominations.
Ed, I just have one quick question. It was referenced that there was some county money that had already been tagged for that pedestrian bridge. Should we reference the specific site so that somebody who wasn't part of this meeting knows where to go get that study money?
Guess that wouldn't be a bad.
I think you had that reference.
Yeah.
What is the
Chairman.
That reference?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I make a comment?
Sure.
Thank you. I think a vote on this is premature until we find out exactly what we're dealing with. It's obvious from listening to people that they don't know what zoning on the properties are, and they don't know what the conditions have already been taken care of. And I want to make sure everybody knows that before we start, and they're not lost in the process as we go forward.
Carl, this is just for a study. It's not to change anything. That's why I made the motion.
Yeah, all right. So thank you.
You're voting in favor of something you know nothing about.
You're wrong, Carl.
All right, thank you, Carl. So,
You're welcome.
So Tom, the site to that study, what?
The moment.
Capital Improvement Program.
Yeah, it's in the Fairfax County Adopted Capital Improvement Program 21 through 25 on page 213, item
Okay, hold
12.
on. You're talking faster than I'm writing.
I'm sorry. That would be,
Fairfax County Capital Improvement Program.
yes, 21 through 25. Page,
That's the years 2021 to 2025.
yeah, yes, sir. It's I guess
Okay.
it's done in 5-year increments.
Okay.
Page 213. Under Transportation Planning Studies, item 12.
Like, I don't want to see it too long.
Yeah,
So we could add the language, with both nominations, we recommend both nominations be added to the work program to be studied concurrently with the recommendation that a connector from Oakwood Road to Vine Street as referenced, thank you.
As funding
In the
has been,
Fairfax County Capital Improvement Program 2021 to 2025, page 213, be studied along with the undeveloped portion of Land Unit E.
That's okay.
Okay, and that's okay with Leah as well?
Sure.
Okay, we have our motion. All right,
thank you.
I think it's time we head to a vote. So we're going to do a roll call vote. One moment here. Okay, so you all heard the motion. This is vote yay to approve that motion, nay to disapprove, and of course you can always abstain if you wish. So I'm going to call the roll. Robert Livingstone. Robert, are you still with us? I hear no Livingstone. Okay.
He's on the call, but maybe we could come back to him. He's on the call. I see him
still on the call. Okay. All right. We'll come back to him. Carol Gillum.
No.
That's a no. Oh, Rand Pixa.
No.
Another no. Pamela Pineros. Pineros, I'm sorry. Pamela? Do we have Pamela? Is she still on the call?
She's not on the call any longer. I'll see if she's in the attendees list.
Okay. Leah Lambus Skidmore.
In favor.
That's a yay. Okay. Larry? Larry still on the call?
I don't see Larry on the call.
Okay. Jane Kelly.
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Jeff Safel.
No, nay.
All right. Jim Drinkert. Oh, I'm sorry. I somehow missed Tom Rickard. Tom? know you're there, Tom.
I was on mute. You're not doing this alphabetically.
It's actually alphabetic by your community, believe it or not.
Okay. I vote yay.
Jim, thank you. Jim Drinkard.
Abstaining.
Rosemary Clee.
Abstain.
Holly Doherty.
Yes.
Don Tennant.
Yay.
Carl Sell.
Sorry, Ed, for the record, Don, could you say if that was a yay or a nay? We couldn't quite hear you clearly.
Yay, yes.
Okay, that's what I had. Carl. Carl?
Carl's muted. He's still muted.
Carl? Master the mute button.
Do you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yay or nay, Carl?
Nay, for the third time.
That's all right. Mariah Jones.
Yay.
Thank you. Steve Levinson.
Yes.
Tom Sachs.
Yes.
Your motion. All right. I guess we never did get John Tomko. Richard Dresner. I'm sorry? We have Richard Dresner.
Yes, I'm here. I vote no.
Got it. Thank you. Jonna Gagnon.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Going back.
Ed,
Yes.
this is Graham. I received a message from John Tomko that he's voting yay.
He's voting what?
Yay.
Ed, remember to vote. Remember yourself.
I don't vote. I'm the chair. I don't vote. And I guess we're still Robert Livingstone. We didn't have a vote from. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Do we have a vote for Livingstone? Robert? Is Robert on the call? I am not recording a vote for Robert. I cannot hear any vote. And Pamela Pineros and Larry Dempsey were gone. So that is it. Okay, we have, by my count, we have 9 yays, 5 nays, and 3 abstentions. So the motion
Okay.
passes.
That's my count also.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for sticking with us for so long. I was hoping to get this meeting completed by 9 o'clock. Obviously, that didn't happen. I'm sorry.
Ed, we're still meeting next Monday for regular land use, right? This is Donna.
Yes, regular land use Monday night next week. And we have a full calendar, as I remember. So with that, we'll thank you all, and I think we're adjourned.
Thank you. Oh, man.
was this about?
This was about